Hi, welcome to Air Cooled Anything. Today I'm going to be working again on my CB Performance Builder's Choice Kit 2017cc motor. I'm going to be installing the crank gears onto the crank, but before I do that I have to clean it up. Because it's a CB Performance crank, it's got soft plugs which you take out with an Allen key, blast it out, clean it, make sure there's no manufacturing gunge in there, and then we put these back in using Loctite, and that's the crank. Then it's a question of building up all the crank gears. I can't do that today though, because one of the bits I didn't order from them and weren't on the list of parts I bought was the distributor drive gear that goes on the crank. So I've had to order one of those, and I'll have to wait a day or two for them to come. The soft plugs are located on these lobes. There's 4 of them. I'll just show you one. Just comes out easily like this. That's it, like a little grub screw. So now all I'm going to do is use WD-40 in all the little holes and blast it all out. I'll start at the top and work my way down. It says on the box to use 242 blue Loctite or similar. Well, I've got 243 blue Loctite. Plop it in. So crank's all cleaned up, soft plugs back in, Loctite. Good. I can't believe how dirty the crank was. It took a whole can of WD-40 and 2 rolls of kitchen towel to get it clean. I was expecting the engine case to be that dirty and this to be a bit cleaner, but I guess it's just dirt from when it's been manufactured. This is a CB Performance 78.4mm crank, counterbalanced, forged chromalloy, I think, actually, isn't it? Yeah, it's chromalloy. Forged chromalloy. Brand new. Never had a new crank before. All the cranks I've ever fitted to engines have been reconditioned. So this is a new experience. So I'm just test fitting the bearings, and you can see I've already marked up where they go. So once they're on the crank and you're putting seating the crank into the case, you know where they're going to go. So let's just pop that in. There you go, that's seated, and then you can see where I've just used a Sharpie and marked a line. So when the crank goes in, I can just rotate that round. I've done all of them, although you don't really need it on this back one. This drain hole here, and that always goes on the bottom, the front flywheel bearing. And again, marked it, just popped it in, marked it, so when we're putting the crank in, it's nice and easy to locate it. These are the bearings that came with the kit, silver line. They call them race bearings. I don't see why they're race bearings, they're just silver line bearings. I've installed this one. I'm not going to install this one on the other side, because once you put the crank in, you can see how it's bedding down and sitting by putting that on top of the crank and seeing if it rocks. Just received my distributor drive gear in the post. I'm going to install the gears onto the crank shaft. But before I do that, I noticed that some of the edges here, this is a brand new distributor drive gear made in Brazil, and some of the edges here where the threads of the gears come off are a little bit rough and just knurled over like it's been dropped, and you can just see like a little bit of damage. So I'm just going to get a file out, small file, and I'm just going to smooth those out. All the edges cleaned up on this, it's all nice and smooth, so the distributor drive itself should interact with this beautifully. Now I got the woodruff key out just to test fit before we try and assemble it on the gear, because this woodruff key goes in the crank, as you know, and it is a super tight fit. Actually, I can't even get it in there without really forcing it. So I am just going to get some file, and I'm just going to open up this aperture for the woodruff key to slide in. I've tested the cam gear, fits perfectly. Obviously heating it up will probably make it clearance this a little bit better, but just want to make sure it just glides on nice and easily. There you go. That really didn't take much at all. Just a couple of wipes with a small file. You can just see here where I've just taken some burrs off there and some of the other sections of it as well. So these two have got to be heated up to get on the crank, as you know. So the way I do it is I put them in the oven, and I'd say I've only done a handful of engines and I can never remember what temperature I do it at. So I've done it at 150 degrees C. It's already heated the oven. That's 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I put them on a baking tray with a sheet of baking paper, and I always put them the right way up so I can take them off with my welding glove and then just drop them straight on. So the way you put the cam gear on, the dots on the teeth go up, and inside there's a shoulder, and the shoulder marries with the crankcase. Distributor drive gear can go any way up, so that doesn't matter. So I put them the right way up, so I can just pop them up and put them in. And then I'm going to time it for, I'm going to give it half an hour for them to get up to temperature. Whilst the cam gear and the distributor drive gear are cooking in the oven, and actually I've turned it down from 150 to 120, because I double checked and I looked at my Harry Pello DVDs, and when he does his 356 cranks, which is exactly the same thing basically, he suggested 120 degrees centigrade in the oven. So I've turned it down to that because I don't want to overheat them and cause any undue stress. So hopefully they'll just slip on. When I've done 356 motors before following his videos, they've always gone on no problem. So we need to, before we put the cam gear on, we need to put the bearing on. The bearing goes on one way. It can go on two ways. You will put it with the dowel pin hole facing down towards the flywheel. But before we put that on, I'm just going to put some assembly moly lube on, just to aid the start. And I'm avoiding getting any in the oil holes, although I've just got a bit in there. Just take it out with my finger, just to wipe around. And then we put on some of the secret sauce mocked up. It's just 1 part engine oil to 1 part STP. I think most people use this. Put that on generously around the place, and we'll be doing this on all the bearings, rod bearings, as well as the crank and the cam. Only on final assembly, not when we're doing some test fits. So just double checking the dowel pin's in the right place, and that just pops over, and we'll just turn it round. You see I've still got the mark where I've lined up the bearings in the case on either side, just to help me align the dowel pin when I put it on. So another thing we can be doing before the gears come out is obviously the woodruff key's got to go in to the crank. And that's should be a nice tight fit, and you just want to tap it in with a hammer, but you want to be very gentle with it. You don't want to distort the woodruff key so it puts the cam gear under any undue stress. I say be gentle with it. This doesn't want to go in. Oh, there it goes. Don't want to be pounding on it, burring over these edges. Let's try the spacer as a guide to see. Spacer doesn't want to go on either. Maybe we should be heating the spacer up too, because you have the can gear goes on, then the spacer, then the distributor drive gear. So if that's not going to go on, that needs to be heated up as well. So we'll put that in the oven now too. First two gears have been in the oven now for 20 minutes. So it should be nice and hot. So I'm going to take out the can gear and we're going to try putting that one on. I'll leave the other bits in there. I'll leave the spacer and the dizzy gear in there. So holding that on. To say it's the right way up. So put it on. And that's just gone straight down. Don't even need to tap it. I mean, you can, if it's feeling a bit tight, you can just go around and gently tap it with a screwdriver. But I don't want to put any undue stress on the can gear. I mean, it went plop straight down. Easy peasy. Bearing turn still. Great. We could try the spacer. Might be warm enough by now. But I think I'll just give it another... Oh, let's try it. Come on, let's give it a go. So you've been in there 10 minutes. No, that still doesn't want to go on, so I might have to heat this one up a wee bit more. So we'll heat it up a bit more. Right, so that's been in there 20 minutes, that spacer. So let's get it out and try it. Again, when we tried it last time, it had only been in for 10 minutes. So we'll try it again. No. Oh, now it's going to get stuck on, isn't it? No. No. No, 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 no. Oh, bugger. Get it off now. Careful tapping this off because I don't want to damage the bearing surface. So just light taps. It is moving. It's coming off. Who would have thought this part would be so hard to get on? Normally this just like slides on without heating. There you go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with some MAP gas. That changed colour. No, it still doesn't want to go on. Right, we're going to have to heat it up more. Try to bring it down. Don't go too much in case it's not going to go on. No. That got so hot it scorched my welding dust. Yeah, that's not coming off by banging it, and I don't want to bang it any more than that, so I have to get my gear puller out and we will take it off with a gear puller. So I've got my gear puller, which is really a bearing puller, which I used to do this sort of thing, and I put a piece of scrap steel plate to protect the end of the crank there, and we'll just tighten it down. Hopefully it's going to come off. Yeah, it's coming. Right, I'm going to take this off and I'm going to try tapping it again with the screwdriver. Might be kinder on the crank. Just the edge. Oh, shows how good that bearing puller is, doesn't it? That just came straight off. That's a lot of heat. Working quickly. No, I can't really give it much more heat than that, I don't think. There's a lot of heat. So this is a part that's come with CB, comes in their crank assembly kit. There we go, off. It's a new day. After failing to fit this spacer ring to the crank, I went off to go online and buy a new spacer. And then looking at the spacer, I was like, of course. How come I didn't realise that before? The stock VW spacer has, it's like a C with a space. So it's you just open it up and it just drops on and it kind of fits loose, and that's why this isn't fitting on, because it's a completely closed ring with a notch for the woodruff key. And these are called race spacers, because if you're going to race a car and you're going to rev it to high revs, there's a danger of, because the stock spacer is not joined together, it could just come apart and explode inside your engine and destroy everything. So that's why I'm having problems. So I went online, I looked up, and a lot of guys have problems fitting these, and they say you just heat it up and put it on like a gear, which is what I was doing yesterday without much success. So I've cleaned it up. I've just sanded down this face here, laid it on a piece of glass and sanded off some of the marks I made with the screwdriver when I was bashing the hell out of it to get it off. And then I used a barrel file, I suppose you'd call it, and it's kind of a loose fit, and I just turned it on and then turned it round like this, making sure that I do a full revolution each time. And I've honed out the inside of this just to open it up a bit. Now it's still, you can't see, but it still doesn't fit on by hand. It still needs to be heated up. So I'm going to try heating it up again. I'm going to heat this up. I've set my oven inside to preheat at 240 degrees C. So that's super hot. I mean, obviously I'm not worried about the structure, too much about the structural integrity of this, because apart from acting, having forces thrusting on it this way and possibly this way, it just needs to hold together and not blow up. So changing the heat dynamics in this should be okay. So we're going to give it another go with this one. And I'm just hoping that the dimensions this way are the same as the stock one, and once it's all on, I can get the circlip on the crank. But that's kind of the point of this, really, is, you know, me making stupid mistakes and learning so you don't have to, as well as being a great record for me to go back, because I've got a terrible memory and I can look back and say, oh yeah, I remember what I did there. So let's get into trying to put this on, part 2. There we go, it's ready. Still doesn't want to go on. that is heated up to 220 degrees C in an oven for 40 minutes, still not going on. Right, so I honed it out some more and it's beautiful and nicely finished inside. The finish inside's really nice. Tried to pop it on and I noticed it was getting caught on the woodruff key, which I thought's a bit weird because I had test fitted the woodruff key in this before I went through this whole process. So I took it back into the shop and I just ran a file along these edges very lightly. Just took a little bit of material off on the inside of the woodruff key and now it just slides on. But I've obviously taken out so much material from honing it that it's loose, and I don't really want it on the crank loose like that because obviously it's going to make a noise and create harmonics, and so I'm going to junk this off and I am going to have to get a new spacer, and I need to now decide on whether I persevere and get another race spacer, which are like 15 quid, whether I just go to the local VW garage, which is a few miles from here, and just get a genuine German original spacer. I mean, I like the idea of the extra insurance, but I mean, in all reality, this engine's not going to be revving beyond 5,000 RPM. I'm not racing it. It's a bus for going camping in and driving around. Just want a little bit more power and a little bit more torque. But as it's a performance crank, I'm probably going to go with one of these and try the process again. I'm not going to be able to test fit the new one. I'm not going to be able to test fit the woodruff key because the woodruff key is most certainly not going anywhere now. We've got the cam gear on. I'm not pulling that off just to get a woodruff key out. So, learning by my mistakes. It's on, but it's not good enough. New spacer washer turned up in the post. Looks very similar to the one we had before. But if you note, on the CB one, this piece of material here above the notch where the woodruff goes is a lot thicker than this. I mean, I think that'll be enough to hold it together to stop it splitting apart, but it's probably like 2 mil at its thinnest point, which isn't, going to make it the strongest thing, where this one is probably like 3 or 4 mil. Anyway, so I got it out the plastic bag and I went to put it on and it just slides on. It is a tiny bit loose, but nowhere near as loose as the one that I honed out too much, which was super loose. So I must say, I mean, I think this cost with postage, I think it cost like £19–20. There's a lot of money for just a piece of steel that's been lathe. If you had a lathe, you could make one yourself and file out the notch. So would that being loose unbalance the crank? I guess, well, the answer would be yes, it would, because it's going to go to one side or the other. Probably going to go to the side furthest away, so from the woodruff key, because there's less material, so there's more weight this side, so it's going to constantly be out that way. But as it's so close to the point of axis, the centrifugal forces won't be that much, I don't think, unless you're really revving super high. I'm going to go with it because I cannot be bothered to send off for another spacer. And the only other option would be an original one, which has a danger of breaking apart. So it's the best option. Or I could send off for another CB set, wait 3 months, and then not remat out so much. But I ain't doing that. So in short, the CB Performance one is good. You might need to take some material off the inside, but definitely have a go at filing out the woodruff key notch first, which is what I should have done. Next job is to put the distributor drive gear on, and to do that we need to heat it up, and it's in the oven, and we'll put it on in a sec. Please go on. No, not hot enough. I had that on 150. Move quickly. No. I just put that on to 200. So I will have to call it a day now because we need the kitchen to cook. Some guys put their crank, I've read, in the freezer. So the crank gets smaller and then they heat the gear up. I don't fancy that. Don't fancy getting my crank cold. You don't want to get cold, do you? No. So I'm being really impatient. I don't want to wait till tomorrow, and I'm going to heat it up with some MAC gas and see if I can get it hot enough to get on there. It's all very annoying. Normally these just go together so easy. I've never had so many problems. Although I've only made a handful of them, I've never had so many problems as this. Not going to hit it too hard. Just going to seat it in all the way around, make sure it's all the way down. There we go, it's on at last. Next job is to put on the C-clip. This is always a bit of a laugh as well, because I'm such a clumsy oaf when I do this. The thing pings off across the garage normally. The trick with this is when you're putting it on is you don't want to scratch this bearing surface. You want to not scratch it. There you go. That's going to go in, I hope. There we go. That's in. So what you do apparently is you just go around, give it a few love taps. That's in. And what Harry Pello says to do is just to tap it in the gap just to see if it rotates, and if it rotates it's in, and that's in. Nicely seated. Praise the Lord. Next thing, bearing. The bearing goes on with the dowel pin facing down. Also, the oil drain area faces down towards the flywheel, so it goes on like this. But before we do that, put some Molly Lube on. Secret sauce. I'll put a little bit on the inside of the bearing, because why not? Final thing for the crank gear area is your oil chucker, already pre-cleaned. Cup goes up, and then the woodruff key goes in, and probably is going to be a tight fit for something like the other one. Yeah, it is going to be a tight fit. Yeah, that's as tight a fit as the other woodruff key. So I want to put this in without deforming the woodruff key or denting the oil chucker. That really does not want to go in there. Let's have a look at that. Yeah. That's now all burred up on the edges where it's trying to go in and it's not. So, yep, you guessed it, I'm going to have to sand this. So I'll do that and then I'll come back. I've given it a little tickle with some sandpaper. I've cleaned it up. Still a nice tight fit. Is it going to go in? I'll get the persuader out. Yeah, that's going to go in now. Right. Going to use a fat punch to finish it off. I don't really like using a punch because it does make a mark, or it can leave a mark. I'll just do it from side to side, top then bottom. Yeah, you see it's leaving little marks. Not nice, but I don't want to damage the chucker. Better to have a mark than having to start again. Get it in a level. There we go. Whoops, crash bang. Give it a blast off. Make sure there's no bits of steel flaked off. And that's it. That is the crank gear built up. Wow, that was a little bit more complicated and a little bit more drawn out than it normally is. Normally it just goes together in like 5 minutes when I'm working with stock stuff. It goes to show when you're working on a performance motor like this, when all these fancy pants racing parts, it's a lot more complicated and there's a lot more to consider and to work out. Anyway, so the next job will be working on setting the end float, and I've got some work to do on the cam. So thanks for watching.